All right, we're coming back to Luke today, chapter 7. Now, last several, chapter 6, we had what's called the Sermon on the Plain, which is very similar to the Sermon on the Mount from the Gospel of Matthew, but he highlights different things and focuses on different teachings. But as you're going to see, oftentimes when in the Gospels there's a discourse of where Jesus is taking the time to instruct his disciples. What often follows after that will be some real life examples of people who, um, in a sense, are applying what he's been teaching. And so he can lift them up and set them apart as examples for his disciples to follow. And that's what we're going to see here. Luke 6, we had all this great teaching, and particularly about, we left it off last time with Lord, not everyone who says, Lord, Lord, um, why do you call me Lord, Lord, and don't do what I say? And only those who hear the word and apply it are those who build their house on a rock that can withstand the storms. And the importance of not just learning stuff, it's about applying it, putting into practice, and really becoming a disciple, which is an apprentice, not a student who just learns information, but a disciple who puts these things into practice. They're not that hard to understand, but when you start applying them, that's not always easy. So in Luke chapter 7, it's interesting. He puts here, Luke, as he organized the gospel, presents to us next the centurion. And if you remember the centurion, he's the one man that Jesus highlights for his faith. I have never seen such faith, even in all of Israel, even though he's a Gentile. And so we want to pay careful attention to this guy because Jesus is lifting him up to us as this is what you want to be. Whatever this guy has, this is what pleases the Lord. So, with that, let's get right into it. And we'll read the story about the centurion, verses 1 to 10. And Liz, would you start us off, Liz Pervinus? Would you read for us Luke 7, 1 to 10?
All right. After he had finished all of his sayings in the hearing of the people, he entered Capernaum. Now, a centurion had a servant who was sick and at the point of death, who was highly valued by him. When the centurion heard about Jesus, he sent to him elders of Jews, asking him to come and heal his servant. And when they came to Jesus, they pleaded with him earnestly, saying, "He is worthy to have you do this for him, for he loves our nation, and he is the one who built our synagogue." And Jesus went with them. When he was not far from the house, the centurion sent friends, saying to him, "Lord, do not trouble yourself, for I am not worthy to have you come under my roof. Therefore, I did not presume to call you, but say the word, and let my servant be healed. For I too am a man set under authority with soldiers for me. And I say to one, 'Go,' and he goes, and to another, 'Come,' and he comes, and to my servant, 'Do this,' and he does it." When Jesus heard these things, he marveled at him, and turning to the crowd that followed him, said, "I tell you, not even in Israel have I found such faith." And when those who had been sent returned to their house, they found the servant well.
All right. Now, I don't know if you notice, there's something peculiar about this story. Um, Regarding the centurion.
Yep.
Do you see what it is, Rob?
Are you referring to how it says in Matthew 5?
What is that?
Um, we used to have a paradox of the week in my house. A paradox is an apparent contradiction. It's not a real contradiction.
Yeah, yeah.
And so one of the Gospels has the mother of James and John coming to Jesus. And another Gospel in that same situation, they say James and John came to Jesus.
Yeah.
And so unbelievers will point that out. So you guys can't shoot straight. Who was it? In this passage, it says that the Jewish elders are sent by the centurion to Jesus. But Matthew 5 has it that it's the centurion himself that comes to Jesus.
Yeah.
And so,
In Luke's account, he is emphasizing a different part of it here. And in Luke's account of the story, which is fascinating, is as far as we can see, Jesus never meets the centurion.
Right.
And there's no mention of him having any direct interaction with him, if I can recall. The elders of the Jews speak for him. He sends his friends to speak to him and insists that he not come under his roof.
right.
And then
But
Jesus does the miracle from afar, and then, you know,
the,
which
the
is,
elders are, as his representative, is as good as the centurion being there.
yeah,
And if you like I said, Matthew 5 does not say the elders. I'm reading it. It says, and when Jesus came into Capernaum, a centurion came to him imploring him.
yeah.
That's not what it says in this Luke passage.
No, apparently the way he employs them is through these elders and through these friends. But it's very strange. It's like this is it's a unique miracle in that it's done from a distance, and there's never any contact with the person who's sick or the person who's even pleading for the sick person.
Yeah.
Uh, and yet Jesus is commending this guy. So let's see what we learn about this centurion. Okay, so he's he entered Capernaum. And what do we learn here about the centurion? What are we told about him from the very beginning?
He had a servant who was sick.
Okay, a servant. His servant is sick.
And he
Not-
valued him highly.
Yeah, he says a couple things. His servant was sick, to the point of death.
Yes, yeah.
So he's dying. His servant is dying. And this servant, as you mentioned, this servant is valued. He highly values his servant. That in itself is interesting because again, you oftentimes people don't typically think about their servants in that way. Servants are replaceable. It's not like a child. Servants, if you fire them, you hire new ones, you can replace them. But this servant is particularly special to the centurion, highly values him. What else do we learn about the centurion from, well, what the elders say about him?
That he's been good to them.
Yeah.
He
Loves
built them
them.
their what's it
Yeah,
called?
Synagogue.
synagogue.
Synagogue, yeah.
He built the synagogue for the Jews, and they say something remarkable about him.
He loves our nation.
Yeah, he loves our nation. What nation is that they're referring to?
Yeah.
Jewish.
Israel, the people, the Jews. He loves the Jews.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, please.
And in my mind, it's a pretty dumb one, but what is a centurion? Is he an officer of the Roman army?
Yes. He is in charge of, take a guess, how many men is he in charge of?
100.
There you go, 100 men. Hence the name centurion. Cent is 100. Yeah, he would be someone of authority. So that's why he's got some wealth to him too. He's like a general kind of a thing. He's an important guy. But he is in charge of troops here, and so he loves the nation of the Jews. He built the synagogue for them, and the Jews say to Jesus when they commend him, when they came to notice what happened when the Jewish elders come to Jesus. How do they intercede?
They pleaded with him.
Yeah, Jewish elders pleaded earnestly with Jesus. This man is worthy. So they have a love for him as well, which is a remarkable scene to have a Roman centurion be so adored by the Jewish nation, the Jewish people. That's
A lot about the centurion just by this one, first few verses, because he's loved by everybody. He cares about a servant, and he builds a synagogue for the people that he lives around. He's a man of wealth and stature, being a centurion, and most of them were pretty brutal to the people who were not part of the Roman Empire. But
Yeah.
here he is, very loving and caring.
Absolutely. And remember, back I talked about the example of back in Luke chapter 6, some of the things that Luke focuses on in that, remember, he doesn't use all the Sermon on the Mount. He picks and chooses. And the very first thing he begins with, if I recall, is after he goes through the blessings and woes. After he goes to the blessings and woes, the first thing he commands them is in verse 27, love your enemies, do good to those who hate you, bless those who curse you. And so now you have this incredible scene of a man who is loving his enemies and they loving him. It's a powerful scene. It's a very powerful scene. It is in today's analogies, I suppose it would be like, well, I'll give you an example. I told you my mom is Austrian, and she, grew up in Austria during World War II, and during that time, I think she had even some uncles who were obviously almost any eligible man would be recruited into the army, into the German army. And so the thing about the German army was it's run by the Nazis, but they're a minority. Most of the German soldiers, many of them are Christians, but they're being run by this psychopath. And some of my uncles were actually involved in the German army, and they fought in those times. And one of them, as I understand, was in charge of was given duty in a concentration camp for the Jews. And during that time, he did his best in what power he had to try to treat them kindly and to help them, and to get them food or just to do things. He was never harsh and cruel to them. But he really, he's put in an untenable situation, and he was kind to them. And at the end of the war, the Jews were allowed to exact revenge on their oppressors. And the Jews, when they were freed, were basically, they were allowed to kill and hunt down these Nazi overlords. And there was a bunch of Jews that remembered how he treated them, and they hid him, and they kept him safe when vengeance was due upon the Germans. It was kind of an interesting, but it was a remarkable scene to have a love between two groups that hated each other. See a love between individuals there. That's the power of the gospel. And even today you can see that. It's like, we have political enemies in this world. Like right now, China is the number one enemy of the United States. But as believers, we have hundreds of millions of Chinese brothers and sisters that we care about, or North Korea, hundreds, millions of North Korean Christians that we care about. Even though our nations are enemies, yet we're family. Love your enemies. So it's again, you'll notice how it's paralleled with it here. He puts it there to show this, and he makes the point of it's the Jews pleading for him, not just that this man is coming to Jesus, but the Jews are interceding for him as well. So let's what else do we see about this guy? So now let's talk a little bit about what else we see from his message. Now Jesus goes with them. He's not far from the house, and the centurion doesn't come out to meet him. Why not? Why doesn't the centurion come out to meet Jesus as he's coming toward him?
Like he doesn't feel worthy.
Yeah. He says it, right? What does he say?
Do not.
Not worthy
I'm not
to have you
worthy.
come to my roof.
I'm not worthy to have you come under my roof. That's a really interesting phrase. That the centurion now he pleads with Jesus, and he establishes, let me put it this way. What does he believe about Jesus? Let's talk about that. That's really the heart of it.
Jesus can just speak something and it will happen.
Yeah. He believes
Jesus
A couple
commands.
things. What's that?
Jesus commands.
Yeah, he believes Jesus commands. He says, how does he address Christ?
Lord.
Yeah, he really believes that Jesus is Lord. That he, whatever he commands, comes to pass. Just say the word. And I think in the, isn't it the Catholic Church? This phrase is constantly in like every, isn't this every mass they say this phrase, right? But say the
Yes,
word, and my
I'm not
servant.
worthy to, I'm not worthy to receive you, but say the word and I will be healed.
Yes,
Yeah,
yes. If you remember that.
yes.
And that's taken from this guy right here.
Before communion, yes.
Yeah, before communion. I'm not worthy, but say the word and I shall be healed. Which is a paraphrase of what the centurion says here. I am not worthy, but say the word and my servant shall be healed. It's a great line of faith there. Whatever he commands, he believes Jesus Lord and that he is not worthy. Now, the whole phrase, I'm not worthy to have you come under my roof, is interesting. In this sense, is that, if Jesus comes under the centurion's roof, then the relationship now is that the centurion is the host and the master, and Jesus is the guest. And Jesus, in a sense, when you enter someone's home under their roof, in a sense, this is their domain.
You're under their protection.
Exactly right. You're under the authorities there. So whenever I come into someone's home, I am not the one in charge. I am their guest. I am there at their pleasure. They have every right to kick me out anytime they please. If we're in a public space and they say, get out of here, I can say, no. I have just as much a right to be here as you do. But if I'm in their home and they say, get out of here, I have to get out of there because they have the authority. That's their space. And so you can see the centurion does not even for a moment want to be seen as someone who has any kind of authority over Christ. It's a beautiful picture of his humility in this regard. As he sees this, he says, look, I am a man under authority. I know how this is. You are not in any way under my authority. And he's used to bossing around Jews, believe me. He's used to telling Jews where to go. This is the Roman land. The Jews are just living there, and he has authority over them. But for Jesus, he says, I do not even enter my roof. I don't even want to presume to have you. I'm not worthy to have you there. You are not under my authority by any means. So you can see Jesus says he acknowledges Jesus' complete authority.
The Jews that he sent out, or that came out originally, were the elders. The elders are not the same as they're not necessarily like the Sadducees or the Pharisees.
They could be. So the elders, the Sadducees and the Pharisees are sort of parties. They're like political parties. The Sadducees are more of the priestly class. The Pharisees are of a particular sect, very devoted to the law and to the rigorous thing. That is different from the elders are official positions. So it's kind of like, think of it that way. Sadducees and Pharisees are like Democrats and Republicans. The elders are like the representatives, the governors, people in authority. So they could be them. The Sanhedrin would have included people from different sects present there, but they were those who had authority. These are the leaders, the elders of the town, of the leaders of Capernaum. I think this is all. Is this all happening in Capernaum? I know that
Yes.
he enters Capernaum. Yeah.
Were they opposed to each other, the Sadducees and the Pharisees?
Oh yeah, they hated each other. Absolutely. So the Sadducees are kind of like they're the priestly class. They didn't believe in the resurrection. They were more very much influenced by the Greek culture. So they were often looked upon as sort of the elites. You would say that they were the more liberal in that regard, whereas they were not as rigorous about the law as the Pharisees were.
But
The
they only
Pharisees,
believed the first 5 books, right? They didn't follow any of
yeah,
the books after that.
yeah, and they were, and again, they and the Pharisees on the other side and the lawyers and the scribes were like your fundamentalists. They're your very they would err toward more legalism. It would be they would be more like your Jerry Falwell types, your Bible thumping believers. And so they just hated each other. They absolutely hated each other. And you saw that in America. That's always been the battle since the around the turn of the 1900s between the liberals and the fundamentalists. That was always the raging battle. The liberals are coming along saying we need to get with the tide, get with modernity. We need to, the church is outdated. We need to really be friends with the culture. And the fundamentalists like, no, we need to get back to the basics and they just despised each other. And which is really interesting that the one thing that brings them together is they both hated Christ. They both hated Jesus, you know. So there's a parable, if you remember the parable of the Good Samaritan, that I love that parable. When you understand the dynamics between those two parties,
Mhm.
the parable is really powerful. It's if you remember, a lawyer, one of the scribes, one of the Pharisee types, comes to Jesus and says, what's the greatest commandment? He says, love your neighbor. And he says, but who's my neighbor? And then he tells him the story about the Good Samaritan. If you remember how the story goes, it's a setup. So there's a Jew who is on his way and he is attacked. If you remember, he's left for dead. And the first person that stops by and passes by him, do you remember who that was?
The priest, wasn't it?
It was a priest. And the second person that passed by, if you remember who that was?
I know he's also in the higher. I don't know if there's a Pharisee or
No,
Levite?
he was a Levite.
a Levite.
So there were two of the priestly class that the lawyer that he's talking to, these are people he despises. And so he's probably thinking, well, of course.
Yeah.
They have no regard for our people. And you can feel him like, yeah, I can totally see that. That's so typical of those guys. They're awful, right? And he's getting ready for the third person to come by in the story, someone like himself, a good lawyer, a good Pharisee, someone who loves the word. And then Jesus just throws him off when he mentions the only people he hates more than the Levites and priests. The Samaritan is the one who comes and shows him mercy. And he even at the end says, he asks him, who was it that was the neighbor? And he says, he can't even say the Samaritan. He's like, the one who showed him mercy kind of thing. He's just so taken aback. And so I did that story in South Africa when I taught a class there. And they were all the students in this class were black and wonderful people. And but in South Africa there's a lot of racial tensions still, as you can imagine. And I knew this a little bit about them. Is there's the one group of people the blacks hate with a passion. In fact, they have a political party basically calling for the death of these people. Is what are called the Boers. Have you heard of the Boers?
Yeah.
The Boers are the white farmers. Are the Boers? They were the ones who, when they were in charge of the country, they were the ones who instituted apartheid, and were very harsh. But they hate them even though apartheid's been over for 30 years, they hate the Boers. But there are lots of other different. There are Indians in South Africa, and there are different kinds of tribes. There are British people. The British people and the Indians, they're not the biggest fans of, but they don't hate them like they hate the Boers. And so I told them the parable again. I said, one day a Zulu was walking down the street. He was beaten by robbers and left for dead. And then along came a British aristocrat comes walking by and he sees the poor guy and he's like, "Oh, I don't have time. I've got to get to my business meeting." And he rushes off and passes by. And then there was an Indian guy who owned a restaurant down the street and he too was too busy, right? And they're like, "Yeah," and you can see they're kind of tracking with me here. And then I say, "But then a Boer came by and he helped the man, you know?" And they're like, "What?" And they were just outraged. I said it was such a great setup. But
Yeah.
so anyway, so there's a lot of tensions between these groups.
So how did they respond?
They started laughing because I mean it was like they were just like because it forces the point of the story is it forces them to deal with their own hatred
Yeah.
for not for the guy on the ground, but their hatred for the one who's actually helping the guy on the ground. You know, that their own, we're all that way. We all make judgments on people based upon past experiences from people like them, and we're so quick to judge. And so it was, I think it was a remarkably effective parable because the setting was so similar to what we had in that first century.
Well, it's
So
a
there's
great
a lot,
reminder to love your enemies, you know?
yeah. So here we have it, loving your enemies. And so again, that this centurion, by the way, if you go to Israel, you can see the remains, and the remains are pretty remarkable of that synagogue that centurion built for them.
Mm.
If you go in there, you can see it online too, pictures of it. It's stunning. It's still many columns are still standing and the foundation is still there. A lot of the towns are completely leveled, but Capernaum is actually remarkably preserved. And so there's no roof to it and there's no walls and like that, but you can walk amongst the ruins of that particular synagogue. It's pretty amazing.
I wonder how he built it, and given the fact that he had superiors who wouldn't agree with him. How he built
I don't
it.
know. I mean, but if he built it himself, I mean, I'm assuming that means he financed it, right? That he would have,
Yeah.
you
Yeah,
know.
but that they would allow it, because I was
Yeah, well,
wondering
I think
the same thing.
yeah, I think that I don't think the
Yeah, that's true. The Romans allowed you to have your own way, so long as you know,
yeah.
like didn't shoot them, so to speak.
And remember that it was Herod that built the temple,
Hmm.
that renovated the temple, King Herod, under the Roman authorities, who built their temple from. And so it was a way of appeasing them. I think it gave the Romans some leverage in keeping people at peace, is doing them favors like this. You know, so I don't, you know, it'd be one thing if he was building them a fortress. That would not happen. But a synagogue is a place of peace. They can worship and and just the problem with the Jews was there was always this group that was militant among them that were wanting to overthrow the Romans and take back the land. And that's why they were just a thorn in the side to the Romans all the time. Most of the other people they conquered were content to just be left alone. We leave you alone, you leave us alone, just live at peace, and everything's fine. But the Jews were like, no, we're going to take this back. And any chance they got, there would always be some kind of a Christ figure who would want to lead the people to some kind of military victory. And that's what ended with their destruction because the Romans were like so sick of it. They can't take this anymore. And they just destroyed him. And that's, Simon the Zealot, one of Jesus' own disciples, would have been a part of that group coming out of that group.
Hmm.
All right. So let's look at what he says. Because I think that the highlight of the passage is really the words of this centurion. Is quite a bit given to it. Let's read that one more time. Verse 6 down to 8. Bob Thomas, would you read that for us again?
Sure. And Jesus went with them. When he was not far from the house, the centurion sent friends, saying to him, Lord, do not trouble yourself, for I am not worthy to have you come under my roof. Therefore I did not presume to come to you, but say the word, and let my servant be healed. For I too am a man set under authority, with soldiers under me. And I say to one, Go, and he goes, and to another, Come, and he comes, and to my servant, Do this, and he does it.
Again, I find it interesting that Luke mentions that he sent friends, not just messengers, but he sends friends. This man seems to be the love of this man is pretty evident in the passage. The Jews love him, he loves them, he has friends he sends, and they even plead to Jesus for him. But through his friends, what does he say? Let's look at that. Let's break down what he says here in verse 6. What is the message he sends to Jesus?
Don't trouble yourself.
I'm sorry, Bob? Rob?
Don't trouble yourself.
Yeah, don't trouble yourself. But what does he mean by don't trouble yourself?
Don't come. I'm not worthy.
Yeah, don't make any effort from me. Just say the word. I don't need a dog, but just say the word. You can do this. It's really interesting. He doesn't. Other people are demanding a sign of Christ. They want him to do something. You remember, like Herod. Herod, if you remember when Pilate sends Jesus to Herod, and Herod is hoping that he'll perform some kind of miracle for him, put on a little show for me. Let me see something. And the centurion doesn't even care. Don't trouble yourself. I don't need to see you. I just want my servant to be healed. I know you can do it. I'm not worthy. Don't trouble yourself. I am not worthy. Even after the Jews have said he is worthy of himself, he says, I am not worthy. I'm not worthy. I did not presume to come to you.
For
So
a man in such authority, he's very humble.
yeah. And he understands that authority. So look at how he presents this authority. What does he say about it? Verse 8. I'm a man. Verse 8.
Yeah.
Set
Set-
under
Set
authority.
under authority.
That under authority with soldiers under me. So he references, he gets it. This is, what do we call this? If you're under authority and you have those under you, they have a phrase for that.
Leader.
The leader, and this is like the chain of command he's referencing here. This chain, like I'm under authority, there are guys above me, and I'm above other guys, and I understand how authority works, and that is, I say to one, go, and he goes. I say, go, and he goes. I now say, come, and he comes, and to my servant, do this, and he does it. And what does that mean in regard to Christ?
That Jesus is the top of the authority.
Yeah. Jesus, you have all authority. In fact, just say the word, you can command disease. You command life and death. So you can just say the word, just say live, and my servant will live. That's all. Just say be healed, and he will be healed. It's a great scene of such. This is what faith is, a beautiful picture of faith, because there's a tension here. We mentioned part of it already is the humility in the man is remarkable. For a man of such wealth that he can build a synagogue, and of such authority that he's a centurion commanding troops, and probably is the most powerful man in Capernaum. Even above, I mean, the elders are there at his pleasure in a sense. He can shut them down anytime he wants to. And yet he is so humble before Christ. But on the other side, what do you notice about him? Faith is not just being humble. There's an interesting combination. There's something else that goes with it.
Belief.
Yeah. Belief. Look how confident he is Just say the word, he'll be healed. You know, he knows. Um, he has such confidence in Christ, and he doesn't presume to come to himself, but he sends. Um, he hears about Jesus, and he sends elders to him. He sends friends to him. He sends two groups to him, if you will. There's a boldness. There's a combination of humility and boldness. We're talking about this with the in the women on going through Matthew, and you see this example again and again. The leper. If you remember the leper that comes to Jesus, and he says, "Lord, if you're willing, you can make me clean." And he says, "I am willing. Be clean." He touches him, and that combination of this humility is a leper, but he's so bold to come up to Jesus, instead of standing away. Or the two blind men that are screaming, "Son of David, have mercy on us." Absolutely humble situation, but they're shameless, and everyone's trying to quiet them, and they keep crying out. There's such a boldness and a humility at the same time, is where you see kind of this faith coming together. He doesn't come to Jesus with a boldness combined with an arrogance of like, I'm worthy of this, Lord. You need to do this for me. That's not faith. And he doesn't have this humility that leads him to be very shy. Oh, no, I don't dare ask him anything. I'm not worthy to him even. He won't even listen to me. I'm not worthy. But he is like, no, I'm not worthy, but he's the man. And if he says the word, I shall be healed. So I think he's absolutely terrific at putting those things together. It reminds me of when Jesus says you need to have the faith of a little child. There's nothing that captures humility and boldness like that of a little child. Just the absolute humility. They know that they need everything from you.
But
And they
they're
have the
not afraid
nerve.
to ask.
Exactly. They have the nerve to ask for it, right? They have the boldness to come and to plead, but they know they need it. They need it, and it's that's why it says your faith needs to be like that of a little child, and you can see that with this centurion. He really captures that. Jesus' final remarks about him. Jesus' response to the centurion.
He marveled at him.
He marvels. He marvels at him, and then he praises him. Well, let's say commends him to the crowd. What does he say?
I tell
Not
you,
even
I tell you, I've not even in Israel have found such faith.
Yes. Not even in Israel. Such faith, which is sort of an interesting dynamic, because on the one hand, it praises the guy, but it also kind of condemns Israel that they don't have such faith, that he's come to them and they have not come close to giving him the response that this guy has given him.
Yeah, everybody else keeps asking for a sign, and this guy says, just do it.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah. He's like, I just want to get it done. I just want my servant to be well. And you'll notice that when those who had been sent returned to the house, they found the servant well.
Mm.
So even before they get back, so imagine. And you can see Luke, this is very important for Luke, because again, for whom is Luke writing this gospel?
Gentiles.
He's writing it for the Gentiles. He's a Gentile. He's writing it for Gentiles. And to hear this story, if you're a Gentile, you're feeling good, because this guy he's one of us. He's one of us. And look how Jesus loves him. Look how he sees faith in him. Even though we feel like him, that we're not worthy. We don't really belong. We're the B-listers, if you will. We're like the Israel is like the A guests. They get the first invitations, and we're on the waiting list, and we just kind of sneak in because they've rejected it. But look at how he treats him, how he commends him, and lifts him up above the others too.
Mm.
So, all right. So that's the story of the centurion. Any comments, questions about that story? That was All right. Well, let's pick it up from here. Let's the next story about the widow at Nain, verse 11 to 17. Jack, you want to get that for us?
Sure. To where the 17? Okay, the whole thing.
Mm.
Soon afterward, he went to the town called Nain, and his disciples and a great crowd went with him. As he drew near the gate of the town, behold, a man who had died and was being carried out, the only son of his mother, and she was a widow, and a considerable crowd from the town was with her. And when the Lord saw her, he had compassion on her and said to her, "Do not weep." Then he came up and touched the bier, and the bearer stood still. And he said, "Young man, I say to you, arise." And the dead man sat up and began to speak, and Jesus gave him to his mother. Fear seized them all, and they glorified God, saying, "A great prophet has arisen among us, and God has visited his people." And this report about him spread throughout the whole of Judea and all of the surrounding country.
Okay. This is a great story. The last one on the centurion, the focus is really on the faith of the centurion. In this one, you'll notice we don't know anything about this widow. We don't know if she believed or not. She doesn't say a word. We don't know even if the man believes, even after he's raised from the dead. He just doesn't speak. It's really not about them. It's saying something about Christ. Is the focus is on Jesus in this passage. So he goes to now. So he goes to Nain. I'm not sure where that is. I think it's somewhere near Nazareth. But and who's with him?
His
Disciples.
disciples
And the whole crowd
and
of
a crowd of people.
And a great crowd. So what he's about to do now is showcasing something about himself. What do we see here? What's the situation? He draws near to the gate of the town.
the widows bring their son out to be buried.
Mm.
Okay, a man who had died is being carried out. If I'm correct here, I believe they buried the same day that the person died.
Sunset.
What's that?
Before sunset.
Yes. So they try to bury the bodies as soon as possible. And so they're carrying the man out. And what's the situation with this? That's very important. A little detail about this man.
He's an only son, and she's widowed, so she has no one to take care of her.
The only son of a widow. So the story is about it's a miracle that really is not the focus of the miracle is on her. She's the recipient of this. So she has no one to care for her. Her future is she's in trouble. I don't know what that's going to
Thrown
mean.
out of the community.
Yeah, I mean, if they are the widows are just she's at the mercy of some pretty corrupt people. If you remember the Pharisees, Jesus, woe to you, Pharisees, you devour widows' homes. You take advantage of them, or the widow's mite, if you remember in the temple, that
Mhm.
poor woman, and she just gives a penny, it's all she had.
Mm.
She has no means of taking care of herself. She has no ability to provide for herself. We don't know how old she was. I'm assuming if she's a widow and she's probably, middle-aged, she's not able to get out there. She has no prospect of getting married again and having kids.
She has no land, and all of her stuff was her husband's, and then that goes to her son. So she has nothing.
She has no future. And notice what do we see happens here? And that's the focus of this story, verse 13.
He had compassion and
The
told her
Lord
not to weep.
saw her and had compassion on her.
Mm.
I love this story. It's unlike the centurion who sought out the Lord. this woman, in the midst of her grief and
They just
sadness,
happened to cross paths.
it's the Lord who sees her and goes to her. Really beautiful scene here. He's not responding to her faith. He's not responding to her coming to him, pleading for anything. He goes to her. He sees her and takes pity upon her.
It's a reminder that
There's
God is
there's a
always
lot of
watching.
I'm sorry, go ahead, Liz.
I said it's a great reminder that God is always watching.
Yeah, yeah. Do you know, this reminds me of something? Go ahead, Jack. You want to say something?
I was just going to say that, they must have been a very respectable family because there's a considerable crowd in the town that was following them. So it was also an opportunity for him to showcase himself
Yeah.
to them.
Yeah, absolutely. There's two crowds converging here in the scene. There's the crowd that's following Jesus from Capernaum, and then there's the crowd that's following her. It's like a clash of these two crowds coming together, and Jesus in the midst of it. And he now sees this woman. It's just pure compassion on his part. And he sees her, has compassion on her, and he speaks to her. And what does he say?
Do not weep.
Do not weep. And then, what does he do?
He
Verse
touches
14.
the beer
He,
He touches the beer. Now, why is that?
because then he'd be unclean.
That would be. That's not something a prophet would do necessarily, or someone who was a holy person, to unnecessarily touch the dead. He's being carried. They have to do that. They've got to carry him out, but people don't touch that. That would be an act to make him unclean. But he touches the beer and they stand still. The bearers stood still. And then what does he do?
he commands the men to rise.
Jesus speaks to the man.
Mm.
Arise. So you notice, let's see how it's connected with the centurion. What did the centurion say about being under authority? He says, "Say the word, my servant will be
And healed.
I command my servant go, and he goes, to another come, and he comes. Do this, and he does it. I have authority over my servants." Jesus here is commanding. Who is he commanding?
Dead man.
Commands the dead man. He commands death, if you will. He commands the woman, do not weep. He commands the dead man, arise. And they obey. Just say the word, and he shall be healed. Just say the word, and they must obey. And he shows his authority here. He shows his power and his love and compassion. And I love how it ends. The dead man sits up and he begins to speak. And how does it end?
Wouldn't you love to know what he said?
I know, huh? We don't know what he said. We don't know what he said. That's why it's like the focus is not on the faith or lack thereof. We don't know if the man or his mother believed at any point in their life or even after this happened. We're not told anything about them because that's not the focus. The focus is on Jesus commanding these things. And after he raises the man, what does he do? The man rises, and Jesus gives him to his mother as if he is a gift from the Lord to her.
Mm.
He gives her back her son. Incredible. What's the response now? The response of the crowds.
Fear.
Remember, these are two crowds coming together. And it's fear sees them all, he says here. Fear sees them all.
But I think of this as the fear of awe, not so much the fear of being afraid. because then they glorify God.
Yeah, I wish we could find a way because it is a fear like you're in the presence of the holy. You're in the presence of something awesome. And it is a still fear is still a good word. You do feel it, but it's not anxiety. It's not um the kind of fear that makes you run. It's the kind of fear that makes you stand still in your place. You're awestruck. Yeah, I think it's always it's a challenging word, fear, because you're like the Bible will use it in negative and in positive ways.
Yeah.
And here it's like there's this sense of, you know, on the edge of your seat. It's causing you not to run from something, but to give it your full attention. Because that's what happens when you're afraid. Like if you go to a scary movie and the scary scenes, you're on the edge of your seat. You've never been more focused and attentive when you're afraid. You know, when I come into a place, if I feel any fear, I am watching everything. I am so locked in at that point when I feel that fear, whether it's in a scary sense or if I'm like playing a game and we're coming down to the last part of the game, the last minutes, and you know any mistake you make can cost you the game, and you're locked in at that point. So yeah, fear sees them all. And what do they say? They glorify God. This is the good kind of fear that the fear that glorifies God. And what do they say?
A great prophet has arisen.
A great prophet has arisen among us.
God has visited his people.
God has visited his people.
It's been over, 200 years, so.
And this report spreads everywhere. Okay, so about this story of the widow's son dying and rising again should remind you of a couple of Old Testament stories. Can anyone remember a great prophet in the Old Testament?
Elisha.
Yeah. Both Elijah and Elijah raised boys from the dead. I think both cases, in Elisha especially, it was a widow's son, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
Um, and
Doesn't
it,
Elisha lay on somebody?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and Jesus makes the point later on. It was somebody outside of Israel that he did this for. It wasn't for an Israelite woman. It was from another nation. So this scene reminds you of that, where you have Jesus coming to a widow's son and raising him up and giving him back to his mother, very similar to what Elisha did. And Elisha and Jesus' name means the same thing. Both mean God is salvation. Um, and this great prophet has arisen among us. And again, that should give great encouragement to, if you know that story, to the Gentiles that grace is for them, salvation is for them. And indeed, God has visited his people, and his people are not just Israel, but also those who believe in among the centurions, among the Romans, and so forth. So, and then the news spread. The news spreads throughout the whole region of Judea and all the surrounding country. So it's a good place to break it, I think, here. Any last comments about these two stories? They're really interesting.
It's always cool to remember who the audience is in all of these gospels, because the point you just made, I think, is huge. He would make a different point in Matthew's gospel when he was addressing the Jews, but in this particular gospel, the Jews being very racially oriented. You can only be saved if you're a Jew or convert to Judaism. This shouts no.
Yeah, absolutely.
That would be very significant.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it's interesting. I think what I like about this story too is it just, you can see that with, he is pleased by faith, and he does this miracle and wonder for the centurion, a miracle that the centurion doesn't see, he, as far as he sees his son, his servant rise, but he never sees Jesus. He never has the visual satisfaction of these signs and wonders. He just gets what he longs for, which is his servant to be well. And in many senses, it's a kind of a secret miracle. In one sense, it happens in the home. There's no audience for it when it actually happens. And then you have this other scene that there is this great audience for it, but it's not a scene where he needs there to be faith. He does the miracle simply because he loves and he is full of compassion. It has nothing to do, unlike the health and wealth prosperity teachers who say that if you don't have faith, well, then God doesn't heal you if you don't have enough faith. And they're like, no, there's no faith mentioned in this woman or the man that he raised from the dead. There's no faith at all that's mentioned. We don't know if they believe or not, but there's
They
clearly,
probably didn't even know who he was.
yeah, they certainly weren't looking for him.
Mm.
But he came to them in their time of deepest sorrow and need and speaks the words to them, don't weep, and commands the man to rise. I love it. I absolutely love it. In fact, that's part of what, if you remember Costi Hinn, Benny Hinn's nephew, he really came out of the health and wealth gospel because of stories like this in the Bible, where Jesus is healing people who don't have any faith, who don't even know who he is.
Mm.
And they're like, well, I was always told you had to believe in order to be healed. And yet here are people who didn't. And then to put that together with this is, and what, you'll notice that Jesus, when he heals people, he goes to them. He goes to them. He goes to funerals. He goes to sick places and he heals them. How come we have to have them come to our concerts here? How come they can't? Why, if we have this power of healing, why aren't we in the hospitals going up and down the halls and just healing people left and right? Why aren't we going to the funeral homes? What are we doing here that we make them come to our shows? And there has to be a band with music and lighting and all these things. It really just, I think when you look at the gospel, like you start to really started to make sense to him, and thankfully he's come out of that. But anyway,
So, Pastor, all these people are seeking Jesus. They get wound up with these wrong priests, prosperity people, New Age, all that. What's going to happen to all their souls? Because the Lord knows that they're seeking him. They're just lost.
I don't, you know what? That's a great question, Teresa. I make it a point of like, I don't know what's going on in a person's heart, even if they're under a false teacher, even if they're all I can say is the teaching is terrible and it's destructive and it hurts a lot of people. I don't know what that means for their souls. I don't know how God will judge them. He alone knows their hearts, whether they are sincerely seeking him and are just, sheep that have they're his sheep, but they're just sort of wounded and taken away for a time. I don't know. It's not for me to determine that. But I can say is this teaching is so destructive and so awful and hurtful, because think about it. Like, you have someone who's looking to the Lord for healing, crying out to God, and they're pleading with the Lord, and the preacher is telling them, if you have enough faith, you will be healed.
Yeah.
And then not healed. And now, not only are they not healed, they now have the double guilt of feeling like it's my fault. I didn't have enough faith.
Mm.
And they're burdened with that. And so these teachers, instead of helping them wrestle with this, like, look, God's ways are not our ways. We know he heals, but we also know there are times when he doesn't. Like with Paul, there are times when he doesn't take the thorn away. And we have to bear the cross. And we need to just wrestle with that. Instead of comforting them in their affliction, he torments them and makes them feel that, I'm sorry, you don't have sufficient faith. That's the only way you can get away with it.
I think Romans 3 says, fallen men, and every one of them, no one seeks God. There is not a fallen, dead, unsaved person in this world that seeks God. We seek the things of God, But the only person that seeks God is the one who's been made alive.
Yeah.
Only live people seek God.
Mm.
Dead people don't. They just seek the things of God, getting my ducks in line. I want to feel good, so on and so forth. But it's a regenerated person who desires God to rule over him and seeks him.
Mm.
That's what the scripture says.
Yeah.
There is no one that seeks God. That's where we are outside of God intervening in our lives.
Yeah. And the hard thing is, right now you're dealing with there are all kinds of different people with all sorts of frailties and baggage and troubles and struggles and crosses and burdens that we can't understand, and pain in their life. And so, for someone who is brought up in a stable environment, everything makes sense and orderly in the world, their faith can look a lot different in one sense than someone who has been, just imagine being just completely broken and just having from a young age and being so abused and disoriented. So, faith can be so fragile and so just such a mess in many ways, not also neat and clean. And God sees through that. I don't know how he determines, but I leave that up to him to judge. But I do believe we have an obligation to, especially as a pastor, to call out the kind of teachings that really destroy people's lives.
Of course.
I don't need to say that everyone who follows this particular teacher is going to hell. I don't know how it's going to lead that. But, all right, we can break it here. That was a good discussion. I hope